Welcome, ACPS families. Thank you for joining us. In order to ensure that all are able to access this presentation in their preferred language, we are providing simultaneous interpretation in Spanish, Amharic, and Arabic today. After the interpreters have provided their instructions, please press the globe icon that will appear at the bottom of your computer screen and select your preferred language. If you are watching on a phone, press the three dots at the bottom right of your screen and then select your preferred language. Thank you. Now, I'd like our interpreters to give instructions, starting with Spanish, then Amharic, then Arabic.
Buenas noches, gracias por venir a la reunión a la Escuela de Alexandria de Pública Estudios. Por favor, vamos a comenzar la reunión y tenemos todos los idiomas a seguir, empezando de español, amharic y otros idiomas. Si usted quiere, por favor, tenemos un globo en la parte inferior de la computadora. Eso tiene que hacer un clic y de esa manera va a tener el lenguaje preferido para escuchar la reunión. Gracias.
እንኳን ደህና መጣችሁ የኤሲፒኤስ ቤተሰቦች ለዚህ ፕሮግራም ትርጉምን ለምትፈልጉ የአማርኛ የስፓኒሽ እና የአረብኛ ትርጉም እየተሰጠን ያለው የአማርኛን ደግሞ ለምትፈልጉ የዓለም ምስል ያለበትን ኢንተርፕሬቴሽን የሚለውን ነክታችሁ አማርኛ የሚለውን ቋንቋ በመንካት መጠቀም ትችላላችሁ። በስልካችሁ ደግሞ ለምትጠቀሙ 3 ዶቶች አሉ ዛጋ ነጥብ እሱ ጋር ገብታችሁ ከዛ ላይ መጠቀም ቋንቋችሁን መርጣችሁ መጠቀም ትችላላችሁ። ታንክ ዩ
مساء الخير، بنرحب بالحضور وبنحب إن نذكركم بأنه هذه الجلسة هي راح تكون باللغات المختلفة، وإذا بتحبوا تسمعوها باللغة العربية. إذا كنتوا عم تحضرونا من الجهاز الكمبيوتر أو أي ديفايس تاني، جهاز تاني، في عندكم إشارة الجلوب تختاروا اللغة العربية. ولكن إذا كنتوا عم تسمعونا من التليفون، في عندكم 3 نقاط فيكم تختاروا تكبسوا على هالنقاط وتختاروا اللغة العربية إذا أنتم حابين تسمعوا مباشرة. شكرا على الحضور.
Now, let's welcome John Porter and Tanika Taylor-Tucan, who will introduce our panelists.
Thank you, Delana. We are actually going to defer to our school board member, Rami Gentry, to give the official introduction and welcome.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Rami Gentry. I am proud to serve as a school board member for the city, and tonight I'm especially proud to welcome you to the first of our community conversations for our identity project. I wanted to start our time together by briefly reminding everyone why we have undertaken this identity project. If you would like more details and recordings of previous meetings, please see the ACPS website. Like all school divisions, ACPS has a policy which governs the process for considering the renaming of any school facility. Earlier this year, we received a petition calling for consideration of renaming T.C. Williams High School, and later an additional petition for renaming Matthew Morey Elementary School, which instigated the robust public engagement process we are now undertaking. This public engagement period will culminate in a school board vote scheduled for November 23rd, in which a decision will be made on if the school should be renamed. Recognizing this is not only an important decision, but also a unique opportunity to engage our entire community in a discussion of our history and our lives in Alexandria today, we have found multiple ways to engage the public in this process. We have already had 3 read-in sessions, which allowed the community to learn more about the history of former Alexandria Superintendent Thomas Chambliss Williams and the city's history of segregation in our schools. We have also had a number of student-led conversations. Again, please check the ACPS website if you'd like to see recordings of these previous sessions. Tonight, we kick off the first of 3 community conversations with special guests who can provide unique perspectives to this discussion. We are pleased to welcome Earl Cook, a 1971 Titan who served in the Alexandria Police Department for 37 years, rising to the position of Chief of Police, and Audrey Davis, Director of the Alexandria Black History Museum. Also joining us is Ashley Sanchez Villafara, T.C. Williams High School student and student representative of the school board. They will be answering questions from our moderators and questions submitted by those of you joining us for this discussion. Before turning things over to our moderators, I want to take a quick moment to also welcome and acknowledge our ACPS Superintendent, Dr. Gregory Hutchings. Dr. Hutchings, if you could say hello real quick.
Sorry, hello everybody, and thank you.
And now I'm very pleased to turn things over to our two wonderful moderators for the evening, Tanika Taylor-Tucan and John Porter. Thank you.
Thank you, Rami. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for, again, sharing your time with us this evening. My name is Tanika Taylor-Tucan, and I am the School Engagement and Community Outreach Manager here at Alexandria City Public Schools. And I'm joined tonight by my co-moderator, Mr. John Porter.
And hello, everyone. I'm John Porter. I'm the former principal, or a former principal at T.C. Williams High School. I'm retired from ACPS and currently assisting with this important opportunity for ACPS.
So over the next 3 weeks, John and I have the honor of moderating these community conversations along with several special guest panelists who are members of the ACPS family and our extended Alexandria community. And they're really going to help us engage in a candid reflection process about Alexandria's past, present, and future relationship with race and equity, and the role that that relationship really plays in the matter at hand, which is our considering the renaming of two schools here, T.C. Williams High School and Matthew Morey Elementary School. Throughout the chat this evening, we'll be hearing from our esteemed panelists who will introduce themselves very, very shortly as they weigh in on a few essential questions. And we really encourage all of you who have joined us this evening to use the Q&A feature here on Zoom to share your comments and to ask follow-up questions of the panelists. For those of you who are joining us on Facebook, we encourage you to use the comments there. We are also monitoring that platform. So at this point, we'd like to ask our panelists to introduce themselves to you who have joined us this evening and share a little bit about your connection to Alexandria and why you're here tonight. And I'll turn this over to Mr. Earl Cook.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank ACPS for inviting me to be a part of the panel tonight. I am a native Alexandrian. I grew up in this city, born at an old hospital on Duke Street, which is now a gym, I think. And I attended all of the school system in my education here in Alexandria, a couple of elementary schools, middle school and high school in T.C. Williams. Proud alumni of T.C. Williams, and as part of my experience, high school experience, I was indeed part of the 71 championship team that went on to some media fame with Coach Boone leading the way. Since that time, my experiences in Alexandria, went on to Duke University and returned to join the law enforcement field here in the city of Alexandria. And as was stated previously, I worked 37 years in the Alexandria Police Department, 7 at the position of Chief of Police before I retired. Glad to be with you this evening.
Thank you so much, Earl. Audrey, can you share a few words with us, please?
Yes, thank you. Good evening. I'm sorry I can't be with you on camera with having some technical issues, but I want to thank ACPS. I think these are valuable dialogues to have. My name is Audrey Davis, and I'm director of the Alexandria Black History Museum and its related sites. I have worked for the Office of Historic Alexandria for over 27 years. My work involves the interpretation of African American history in the city of Alexandria. My division, the Office of Historic Alexandria, is working to make sure our city's story is more inclusive. There are 8 museums in our system, and we interpret the history, also interpret the history of sites like the Contrabands and Freedmen Cemetery Memorial, the Alexandria African American Heritage Park, and we have just launched the Northwest Waterfront Route of the Alexandria African American Heritage Trail, a trail that we hope will encompass all of the African American history in the city. So please check out our Historic Alexandria website to find out more about that trail. The Alexandria Black History Museum is committed to social justice and highlighting Alexandria's rich and vibrant African American history. And this is why it is so important to discuss issues relating to social justice, civil rights, and education in Alexandria. So again, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Audrey. And finally, Ashley Sanchez Villafara, would you mind sharing a few words with us?
Yeah, so hello everyone. My name is Ashley. I'm a senior at TC Williams, and I'm also the student, one of two student representatives to the school board. And I've lived in Alexandria my entire life. I've gone through the school system from elementary school up until now, graduating during us experiencing the dual pandemics of racism and COVID. I think what truly brings me here tonight is just my fervor and passion about talking more so about racial equity, but making sure that all student voices are heard. And we have a table for ourselves where we can talk about our experiences and where other people can truly hear our concerns as students. So I just wanted to say I'm really happy to be here tonight.
Awesome. Earl, Audrey, Ashley, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Thank you for all of the work that you've put in here in Alexandria. I can't wait to get the conversation started. But first, we always like to have a sense of who's in the room with us before we dive into conversation. And I see we have over 100 people who have joined us on Zoom and Facebook. So we want to kind of know who's out there with us. You'll see a poll that has popped up on your screens. If you wouldn't just mind taking 30 seconds to let us know your relationship here to Alexandria. Are you a student? Are you a parent? Are you an employee? Are you living here in Alexandria? Please let us know. I'm going to give this about 15 more seconds. We've got more than half of you who have responded so far. Great. It looks like the majority of our the audience who have joined us today are parents of ACPS students. We have a significant number of students as well who are with us tonight, and Alexandria residents. So we thank each of you for joining us tonight. And now I'll turn to our panel. We have heard from many of the people who may be online with us tonight, many from the families, the community members, and even some students who really want to understand why we're talking about changing the names of two of our schools potentially. Can you talk to us about the importance of names, what they can signify, and potentially the type of feelings they can inspire or trigger? And that's for any of the panelists. And I would also encourage our audience members to share any comments or questions they may have in the Q&A feature or the comment box on Facebook.
I could speak very briefly to that, Danica. I would certainly think names are very powerful in any culture. It begins when you're first named by your own family, and usually that name has some connection with your history, both your family history, your ethnic history, and your cultural history. So from our very birth, the name means something very unique to you, and it's to be said with pride, hopefully, and we will invoke all those good memories about your family and your culture. When you start naming institutions after individuals, then that is some sort of token that that person or who has that name is revered. And sometimes, as history has taught us, that's very localized and specific to a period in history where that particular person or that person's history has some sort of value to people. But over time, history is just that, it changes. And different things came out about those individuals, and it may not be currently something that you want to promote in a prideful way. So it has to change. And I think that brings us to where we are now in talking about renaming these two schools.
This is Audrey, and I'd like to piggyback on what Earl has said. I certainly agree with what he has said. And looking at our history in Alexandria, as Earl was saying too, names do change and evolve over time. And then sometimes names certainly do need to be changed. Sometimes, for example, you have a name that brings back a tragic memory, but it's also an important statement. We have many older Alexandrians will remember the Johnson Pool that was created after the deaths of the Johnson brothers who drowned in the Potomac. And there were no integrated recreational facilities for African-American children. And so after their deaths in the early 1950s, the Johnson Pool was created. Eventually that pool was torn down with integration. But to me, that pool is a memory of a sad and tragic time. And there's also a short film that you can find by a filmmaker named Robin Hamilton called Our Alexandria that looks at the Johnson Pool and looks at that story through the lens of equity, integration, and civil rights. I also think about the seminary community in the West End. You can find in city documents where it was referred to for many years as the Mudtown Urban Renewal Project. And Mudtown is an offensive name and a pejorative, and the community members wanted the community to be known by its name, which is the seminary community. So, and also we're coming up on the 100th anniversary of the Parker Gray School. And I can tell you that most of those alumni certainly remember that the name Parker Gray derives from the names of two former principals in the late 19th century, early 20th century, John Parker and Sarah A. Gray. And these educators were so beloved by the African-American community, they decided to name the school Parker Gray after them in 1920. So names have a huge impact on us and our community.
I completely agree with the comments mentioned before, and I think names do invoke harmful memories. And thinking of where we are now, and me thinking through a student perspective, it's the name that we currently have on our high school doesn't reflect who we are as students, and it doesn't reflect what we are as a school division either. Right now, the name that we have just promotes harmful, it just negatively affects students of color and those groups impacted, because we go to a school every day and we don't feel welcomed already being in spaces that we know some people don't want us in. So going to a school named after someone that didn't want us there either further exacerbates those feelings that we have. And I feel like it doesn't reflect who we are as a school division and what we stand for, which is putting racial equity at the center and ensuring that all students feel welcomed and supported. So on the sentiments of can names invoke harmful memories, I do definitely believe that they do. And a name can be whatever you want it to. I feel like with names, you can create new meanings behind them. You can create a new identity, a community identity. And that's why I feel like the renaming here for not only TC, but Matthew Moore is so important, because once we rename the school, that serves as the first of many steps that we have to take as a school division to truly ensure that we're being equitable and inclusive. So I feel like a name can be harmful, but it also can be as a form of growth and a form of redefining and new beginnings.
That, Ashley. I know that some of our families have not been following along with the Identity Project as it has rolled out. So I do want to offer a little bit of context. We've mentioned the name TC Williams, and give some background for families who may not be at that starting point with us. Thomas Chambliss Williams was the superintendent of ACPS from the mid-1930s until 1963. And he resisted desegregation of the schools very strongly and argued that Black and white students learn differently and should remain in separate schools. So when you hear Ashley say that we're in a school named for someone who didn't want us here, that's what she's referring to. Earl, we do have a question from a community member in the chat that's directed to you. And he asked if you and your peers had any knowledge of who T.C. Williams was while you were attending TC as a student. And we'll start there.
Yeah, I have to, unfortunately, I'll speak for myself and maybe I represent some others. When I was at T.C. Williams, there was a certain element of ignorance on my part in terms of the complete history of T.C. Williams. And what I did hear, I unfortunately superficially did not delve further into it. I mean, I had heard rumors that T.C. Williams was not a good superintendent for minorities, but it was fairly kind of like a harmless statement like that. And we kind of skimmed over it when I was in school and we went forth with what we were doing. I'm not so sure that we shouldn't have been more involved. I know there were still students who were much more active involved in the civil issues, because when we started, I remember the year leading up to going to T.C. Williams. I am a previous student of George Washington High School before they desegregated. And the main concern, unfortunately, in the context of this question, was it was more about what was going to happen getting together into school and the functionality of how that was going to work over exactly what the name of the school was. And in many ways, there was a lot of discussion, I remember at that time, about changing the school name perhaps because T.C. Williams was also a standalone school among the three high schools in the city. T.C. Williams, Hammond, and George Washington. And then it was decided, in my memory, that it would remain T.C. Williams as the high school name. So that was the context of talking about the name for me when I was 16 years old.
Thank you. Thank you for that. In my role as school engagement and community outreach manager, I've had the opportunity to interact with a really wide range of the people who make up our community here in Alexandria. And it seems regardless of which side of this issue that they fall on, whether it's to change the name of the schools or to not change the name of the schools, there's usually a strongly held personal belief or experience why they feel that way. For each of our panelists, can you share with us any personal belief that's really the most important as you consider issues like this of renaming schools and institutions like TC and Morey?
This is Audrey, and for me, as a personal issue, even though tonight I'm also representing the city as part of my job as director, but for a personal issue, for me, important personal values are inclusion and equity. And what we're doing in the city and that I see personally and through my lens in the job is always thinking about what's in the best interest of the community and the city of Alexandria, and how we make sure that we're standing by our city values as a welcoming and inclusive community. So to me, that's the most important personal value.
Thank you, Audrey. Ashley or Earl, did you want to add anything to that about your own personal beliefs and where they lie?
I think for me, a personal value that I kind of stand behind is just this whole idea of being critically conscious. I feel like not a lot of people are empathetic or understanding towards other people's circumstances and their backgrounds and where they come from, and they don't understand how these systems and institutions that we're talking about affect people differently. They don't understand their role within these systems and institutions. So for me, it's that whole notion of being critically conscious just kind of stands behind naming the two schools, because it proves to show that we are taking that step to really analyzing, identifying, and making these systems visible and actually addressing these issues. I feel like as a school division, we haven't really addressed these issues appropriately in the way that we should. So for me, it's just standing behind this whole idea of being critically conscious, because even for me and many other students of color, our experiences being in academic spaces where there are disproportionate numbers of students of color to white students, we lack that whole idea of being critically conscious and being empathetic. So for me, that goes along the same lines with this renaming both schools, because that just serves that we're, being aware of these systems and we're truly trying to make all students feel inclusive and supported.
I would say both the previous speakers, I really like what they said about this when we talk about inclusion and equity. Those values are also important to me, as I'm sure many of the people who are watching or listening tonight. But the reason, as it relates to the name change itself, I have very good feelings about T.C. Williams High School. But T.C. Williams High School for me is not the name or the person who was named T.C. Williams. T.C. Williams was the people, the structure, the school system, and the city, and the feeling you got from your city being educated in this city. My concern about not changing the name is that where are we setting our people and our young people through the educational process when we don't ensure, unlike myself, because I was asked previously about what was it like when I was 16 and the name T.C. Williams was there, is that we should correct past mistakes. It was a mistake, I think, for the culture and the city of Alexandria to name the school after a segregationist. Now, at the time, that wasn't their concern, or I don't think they would have named it after T.C. Williams. However, today, we're hopefully have changed. Changing the name now, I think, is a symbol of our recognition that Alexandria is a city of inclusion and diversity. And if you recognize that a mistake was made, you should correct the mistake. Because as we talked earlier, the name is very important. I hope after we change this name, no student will ever enter the doors of T.C. Williams as a first day student and not go over the history of what that name means and what it represents for the school system in the city of Alexandria. So for me, if you're going to be a city of inclusion and diversity, which I think we are, especially diversity, whether we like it or not, then educationally, the name should reflect what we want our students to know and what kind of citizens we want them to become through these type of issues when we talk about institutions like education.
Thank you for that, Earl. I think that I can honestly say that we believe that Alexandria is an amazing city, that it's frequently topping so many of the lists that we see published in various medium, whether that's safest cities in America, best small cities in America, and even the most diverse city in Virginia. And ACPS, I think, is equally about equity and empowerment and inspiring students to thrive. So given that context, and several of you have already touched on this already, shifting from the personal beliefs, what's the most important community value that should be held up as we're making this decision to change or not change the name?
For me, this is Audrey Davis again. I do think that probably the most important community value is inclusion. We have an incredibly diverse student body at T.C. Williams now and in all ACPS schools. And I think our history and our stories in our community need to reflect that. And that's certainly something that we're doing in the museum field, and my own high school is doing it. I grew up in Washington, D.C., and I went to a Catholic girls' school, but we know that the sisters bought slaves. There were slaves on the property. And I've been involved in a number of community conversations examining that history and how we make my high school a more comfortable place for its student body, where we reflect all of that history and we're honest about that history. And for me, it's an interesting sort of sidebar, because that history also reflects with our Alexandria history and the work I do here, interpreting African American history. And so I think our most important value, community value, is definitely inclusion, but also the fact that it's not a value, but that we have amazing history here. And we have so many communities that are contributing to that history every day. And we have a city manager, school superintendent, who are dedicated not only to inclusion and equity, but to social justice. And the fact that we now have our new racial equity officer, Jacqueline Tucker, working with the city of Alexandria, I think you can see that we're embracing so many values that will have a direct impact on our students and our community as a whole.
I agree with Audrey. She said it better than I. I like inclusion, obviously, just because I think it's true. But I also, what's very, very important going forward, because we're in, again, a huge change in America of where we're going, and some enlightenment. The other community value I think we have to embrace is enlightenment. We want to be an enlightened society. We want to show growth. We want to show change to the correctness of what life should be. So I think being enlightened by what is happening, what is going on today, what is trying to change what was wrong yesterday, then I think you can't hold to those old values that talked about segregation, that celebrated segregation in some ways. And in that person, T.C. Williams, we see that person so fervently involved in segregation that I think Alexandria absolutely wants to distance itself from that. And that's part of the process we're doing right now.
I think for me, one of the most important community values is the whole idea of unity. I feel like unity is something that is so critical to this renaming process, because we all need to be able to be in a space where we are responsive and we do understand each other, and we do understand the history of our city, and we do understand who T.C. Williams was, who Matthew Moore was, so we can all come to a consensus of what we want to do, how we want to change ourselves, and how we want to redefine ourselves. And specifically, as like for students, we've really come together as students and created a community. We've unified under the same commonality of going to the same school. Not the commonality of interests or what we all like, or it's just that we all go to the same school, and we all feel, and we all reject T.C. Williams. We all reject who that is, and we do want to make a change. We do want to address the notion of going to a school, being in a school that wasn't equitable, wasn't inclusive for all students. So for me, that value really is unity, because I feel like with unity, we can create a community, a platform where all voices are heard, and we can really bring that change that we want.
Thank you, Ashley. I think listening to each of you reflect on that last question and lifting up the ideas of us being an enlightened community, being a unified community, that those are definitely goals that are laudable and that we should be working toward. I think this renaming schools process is also one way of reckoning with Alexandria's history. So this might be a little bit outside of the scope of the subject tonight in terms of the actual renaming, but what additional actions or alternative actions should ACPS consider to achieve this? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, for me, thinking about additional actions, and I'm probably certainly preaching to the choir on this, because I know with some of my connections in ACPS that you are looking at this already, but looking at your curriculum and making sure that the curriculum is inclusive and reflecting the community in Alexandria. And that's a way, by understanding our history, that you can evolve and see where changes need to be made. Also, I can't be on this panel without making a shameless plug for the Office of Historic Alexandria Museums. We have wonderful museums, and we are always willing to work with ACPS, with parents, with students. Unfortunately, I know the pandemic has changed everything for all of us, but we are here as a resource for you. And there's so many wonderful stories. And I look forward to the day when I can see so many more people in person again. But I think by looking at what the museums can offer, what we're doing in the city as a whole with our social justice journey, and looking at the curriculum, bringing in things where you are looking at more of our citizens who know these stories and the histories that you may not be aware of. I remember some students saying they had no idea about T.C. Williams, but maybe by working in oral history where you can interview some of these citizens who are still around who had interaction with him or had a story about their experience in school, in our ACPS system, are ways to achieve new goals and to make sure that we are reflective of our whole community.
Audrey.
I'm hesitant to say this because if you talk about PTAs and other things in schools, it's sometimes a hot topic. But I know all of my career and knowledge about the school system, trying to have vibrant and active PTAs around the city, to me, is essential to each school's success. The parents associated with those PTAs tend to be a hardcore group that is really involved, volunteer a lot, and do a lot of things. I would say continue your efforts to expand your PTAs and deal with the education opportunities for the parents involved in that around equity, inclusion, and even learning, so that they have opportunities to learn, whether it's online or at any of our classes that may be given, that's offered to adult education on that parents through the PTAs, because the PTAs, I think, are such an intimate way to have our schools achieve success in every sector of the city.
For me, I agree with the comment previously said about looking into the curriculum. The curriculum is very biased. It doesn't talk about all the history, and it doesn't align with the wonderful and like the plethora of student cultures that we have in our school community. So for me, the first action is really looking at the curriculum and ensuring that it isn't biased and it isn't whitewashed, and it's not only looking at history from one perspective, and not truly, it's just covering it from the surface level and not going into depth with what truly happened. And I think another thing would be to really create more spaces for students. I feel like students don't really have the opportunity to actually speak and to tell their experiences within ACPS. I know there's so many unheard experiences of students, and they never get the opportunity. It's very rare for students to get the opportunity to actually speak and talk about their experiences and just tell people their truth and what happened. And I feel like experiences is just one of the most important things if we really want to make a change as a school division, and to really move forward in a positive way. With the whole identity project that Lorraine and I, the student conversations portion of the identity project that Lorraine and I are leading, this is like one of the very rare opportunities where us students can come together and really talk about our experiences and really talk about what we've been going through within the school division, and to better comprehend each other, and create unity with that. So it's just creating more spaces for students to actually hear their experiences instead of asking them to fill out a survey, because it's very different filling out a survey than you actually hearing their experiences. And I can tell you that when during the first student conversation, it was so powerful to hear the experiences of students, not only from the secondary level, but also from elementary school. And that truly made me reflect and just open my eyes to the dramatic changes that we need to make. And it's unacceptable, and it was very heartbreaking to hear, especially students at a younger age, elementary school, talking about how they're so afraid to go to high school because they feel like they won't be included in spaces. They feel like people are going to look at them differently and judge them because of the color of their skin. So it's just, like I said, creating more spaces for students for their experiences. And for me personally, being in academic spaces where academic rigor spaces where I'm the only student of color, I think it's us really identifying and really reanalyzing and looking into those spaces and asking ourselves, why are these spaces like this? Because it's not okay that in these spaces you're the only student of color when we go to a school that's clearly diverse as TC. So it's really looking into why these spaces are like this and making the dramatic changes that we need so that more students of color feel inclined to take these classes and they don't feel like they can't do it. So that's kind of what I wanted to say.
Well, thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Earl. Thank you, Audrey, for lifting up those additional concerns and actions and ways that ACPS can be considering. I know Rami is on the line and Dr. Hutchings are on the line, and that's why we're doing this process. That it's not just about renaming the schools, but it's really taking a look at who we are as a school division, who we are as individual schools, and how we can create these enlightened, unified learning communities for all of our students. I'm gonna try to switch this over to my colleague, John, so he can let us know about some of the questions that have been coming in through the Q&A box so we can incorporate some of those into the program for this evening.
Will do. I think one of them that came through, and I may be paraphrasing these to some degree, but it's for Earl. And Earl, you discussed your knowledge as a student of T.C. Williams and or shall we say lack of understanding of who he was, more concerned about the merging of the schools at that time. But have you and your 71 teammates since that time had any discussions about this issue, about the name T.C. Williams and changing the name, and whether that would be an appropriate thing to do?
Well, I'll admit to some limited knowledge about it because I have been online talking to some of the Titans in the Titans Foundation. I can't say that it speaks for all of the 71 Titan alumni, but there seems to be a consensus in the group I was speaking to that they're a little bit bifurcated in their feelings, as I was, because TCW has a warm feeling about the school and our experience there, but certainly intellectually we can separate out the name T.C. Williams to the actual school and what our experience was. I think most of the alumni that I'm talking to are satisfied that the name needs to be changed in various degrees. Some people more supportive than others, but generally speaking, I think they're in support of the name change. And if the school system should decide to change the name of T.C. Williams, they would be very much involved in the process of what that name should be. They would join committees, or they would be a part of your process if you came to the decision to change the name and then move further into the process of naming it something different. So the conversations I've had has been, let's look into this. If they decide to change the name, we will move with that a decision, and then try and get involved in the actual renaming process.
Thank you, Earl. A number of the questions relate to, is there a policy? How do we suggest alternative names? Can you just change, who can change names? To reiterate a little bit, and Ms. Gentry, you could join in if you feel the need, or if I'm not covering this adequately. There is a school division policy that has been in place and been modified since, or been in place since the mid-1990s, and has been modified on numerous occasions since that time. The policy basically provides for a two-pronged approach. The first prong is what we're entertaining now, and that's whether or not the school board should change the name. There will be, as Tanika mentioned earlier, there will be 2 more of these community chat sessions. There will also be a school board public hearing. The school board public hearing will be on October the 29th. And there will be an online survey opportunity for any community member to offer their concerns and or interest in how they feel about changing the names of TC and or Matthew Maury. The school board's first step is to determine whether or not they wish to change the name. And that's a vote that will take place, I believe, Ms. Gentry mentioned that will take place, if I'm not mistaken, on November 23rd after this discussion has been completed. The second phase, if a determination is made to change one or both names, the second phase would be, what do we change the names to, the names of those schools to? And I believe that that discussion and direction will begin sometime after and or just before or after winter break. And so that a decision can be made in late winter, and any changes that need to take place can be actualized by the summer and the beginning of the next school year. The school board, I believe, does have the right to change and or name and or rename any of its facilities. One of the questions also related to whether city buildings can be changed. And that, of course, would be a city council and or city function, not the school system function. But one of the other questions that was posed was, less than a year ago, the concern was whether or not to open a new high school in light of the size of TC. At that time, t-shirts were stating TC United. Again, at that time, less than a year ago, there wasn't any real talk that had come up regarding the renaming of the school. And the questioner asked if anyone wished to comment on the change and the interest and or the move forward to consider a name change for TC Williams. Any of the panelists? Audrey?
If I'm trying to understand your question correctly, that what was the catalyst for the interest in changing the name is sort of.
And I believe that's the question. What was the impetus for changing the name?
And I don't know if I'm actually the right person to direct it. I mean, I've for years have heard in the African American community here in Alexandria that the name should be changed. I mean, that was nothing new for me. I didn't know his history. Like I said, I grew up in DC, but when I came here in '93, even then I was hearing, I mean, not even then, but I mean, later I was hearing that, you know, that name should change. That really should not be the name for that high school. So I don't know if there was one particular catalyst, but I certainly think the events that we saw during the pandemic with the death of George Floyd, and I don't even want to call it the reigniting, because the Black Lives Matter movement was always there. But I think because people were home during the pandemic, people were able to focus on it and to really understand about systemic racism and injustice and the repercussions of those things. So I think it's probably taken on a new urgency in light of all of those, in light of these events, these tragic events that keep occurring. So I think it's now part of the spirit of the community and the times, and I think it's a good time now for us to have that dialogue. As you know, with Historic Alexandria, we have been looking at our lynching history, and we have been looking at that and making it public and getting the public involved with our work with the Equal Justice Initiative. We also, in March, right at the height of the pandemic, our office acquired the Freedom House site, the site of 5 different slave dealers from 1828 until 1861. But we see that not as the story of just the enslaved, but we want that site to be a museum to the domestic slave trade, but also as a site for race and reconciliation here in Alexandria, and an incubator so that we can also bring more students into the field of preservation and museum work. So there's work going on in all areas of the city. And so I encourage parents and students to be aware of what's happening in not only in ACPS, but what's happening in Alexandria as well, because so much is going on that is changing the dialogue of the way we understand race and civil rights in this city, and equity and inclusion, and looking at all of our communities and all of the contributions that they make to make Alexandria a great place to live.
Thank you, Audrey. And I'm going to direct to Ashley a comment or two. I believe the students played a major role in also bringing this issue to everyone's attention. Can you relate a little bit of the student experience and how this evolved to some degree?
Yeah, I think to the point that was mentioned that, you know, with COVID and everything occurring, we kind of were at home. So we really were able to focus on the racial injustice that occurs in America. And we really began to truly see like the disparities and the discrepancies that we have and how unfair it is for people of color. But for the youth, I feel like my generation, Generation Z, is just, we just have a very unique approach towards activism and just a very unique approach towards these issues. And I can tell you, especially with social media, that's kind of been our platform where we really talk about these issues and educate other people and make it aware to others that don't know what's going on. But I can definitely tell you, I feel like the students and youth had a tremendous role in this process on the local level, but also thinking on the nationwide level. And I just think I'm very fortunate to be a part of this generation because there are so many bright minds and so many young people that are really out there trying to make a change because they see the issues that we as a country continuously provoke. They see the issues that still haven't been fixed. And I feel like as youth, we really have this mindset of, you know, being very responsive and making sure everyone feels welcomed and being inclusive and making sure, you know, we're making people feel comfortable and we're respecting them as humans and seeing them as who they are. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things, especially about my generation. And one of the things that has really catalyzed this whole movement and has really led this movement, especially with the renaming. And I can tell you during our student conversations, the other student panelists that I worked alongside with, they had so many insightful and meaningful comments, and even the students that joined the conversation and spoke, and you could clearly hear the passion that they had, and you could clearly tell that they were so just concerned about the issue and they really wanted a change. And I think that's what our passion and just our ability to really empathize with people and to make sure everyone feels welcomed and included is what truly makes us a generation that's just so different from the others. And a lot of people have hope in our generation for these reasons. And I feel like I have a lot of hope that with this renaming, we continue on having these conversations and making changes within ACPS.
Thank you, Ashley. One last question, and this is more one I think I can answer. It says, did T.C. Williams himself have children, nieces who attended the high school? I'm not positive on this, but he was superintendent from 1933 until 1963. T.C. Williams High School did not open until 1965. And my presumption from that timeline is that his children would have been older and would have attended any schools much earlier in history than at T.C. Williams High School. That does not mean he may not have had a relative during the years that did. I was principal for a long time. I don't remember that piece of history being coming out at any point during my time there. Lastly, there is a question that's more a process question. That's where can you find out more information about what the students feel? And the student sessions have been recorded and are available through the Identity Project. If you go to acps.k12.va.us, it'll be coming up in a moment. And and click onto that. You can find out more information and possibly answer more of your questions. As our time is basically up, even though we got a little bit of a late start, we're still running up against that same clock. I'm going to turn it back over to Tanika to close us out for this evening. Tanika?
Thank you, John. So as you mentioned, the Identity Project, it is a process, and tonight is not the end of it, but we are nearing some really key milestones in the process. We do want everyone to know and be encouraged to participate in a survey that has opened, and I know we've shared that link several times in the chat box, and you'll see it over the next week or so in your email boxes. Please take that opportunity to offer your feedback. There are also several community forums and student conversations that are scheduled between now and October 29th, which are listed here on your screen. And again, we encourage you to continue being part of this process and part of these discussions so that we can continue evaluating and thinking about who it is we are as a school division and how we can be our best selves. Before we close out, I do want to offer Ms. Gentry and Dr. Hutchings a moment to leave us with some final words. And before that, I do want to acknowledge that there are some questions in the chat box that we were not able to get to, some of which are procedural, and we'll be able to follow up with you after tonight via email, others of which we will incorporate into next week's community chat, which you're welcome to join us for as well.
Thank you so much. I just want to thank our moderators, our panelists, and everyone that joined and participated, asked questions. It's been such a pleasure and a real honor to be able to listen to all of these really thought-provoking conversations, the one that we had tonight, the ones we've had earlier, and I know the ones that we're going to have in the upcoming sessions. So again, thank you to everyone for joining in this process with us.